might be interesting just to talk about, well, what is insight, really? And so I just went back to the good old handy dictionary and looked at their definitions. And they had a couple, but the one that I think really makes sense here, I'm going to just actually read because I knew I wouldn't remember it. So it says the act or result of apprehending the inner nature of things or of seeing intuitively. And I think that, especially that last part, seeing intuitively, is really important. And it's really important when you are trying to reach your market and you're trying to do it better than somebody else, or just in a way that really makes sense to who you're targeting. So because we don't have a screen, and I'm not going to give a presentation, I thought the best way to illustrate this was actually to tell a couple stories. So I'm going to talk about two different companies and two very different experiences they had in the market. I'm going to call them Company A and Company B. So Company A was launching a product and service, and it was based on the premise of convenience. They knew that their target market had an issue with convenience. They had a pain point around trying to complete a task that they needed to do for their business that was entirely inconvenient. So their premise was not incorrect. They were right. So they went ahead and launched their product or service, hired a lot of people, got VC funding, and then ran into trouble. Their market was not buying. And they couldn't really figure out why. So a group of us were brought in to help them figure this out, help them reconfigure their business. And one of the things that we found when we went in and looked at it is that this original premise of convenience, they had stopped there. And the thing is that they were validated. They knew, this was correct. But what they didn't do is dig down a little deeper and understand why. Well, why was this such an inconvenience? And really, in the scheme of everything, how big of an inconvenience was this for their target market? And what other things were acting on their target market? What other forces, what other issues were they dealing with? What we figured out is they didn't actually know a lot about their target market. And so, unfortunately for them, after we did all the digging and really got insight into the forces that were acting upon their desired customer, is that we had to come back to them and say, you know what? You're in the wrong business. This is not actually a big enough inconvenience to your customer. And not only that, but you didn't actually design the product in a way that really took away all of the inconvenience. You took away the first level of inconvenience, the one that you understand, but actually you created a second layer of inconvenience. So we had to suggest to them, you're in the wrong market, you have the wrong target, you need to, if you want to stay in business, reconfigure and go after this other market. Unfortunately, by then, it was too late, and shortly after the engagement, the company went out of business. So that was sort of a sad thing, because a lot of people were working at the company and went under. Now let's talk about Company B. Company B was launching a product and service that was actually quite disruptive to the market, and so disruptive that actually, at first glance, it was quite implausible. And they asked us to come in and help them launch this product and also validate their strategy. And the interesting thing is that we didn't have to do that much, because once we started looking at their strategy, we thought, wow, they actually dug really deep. And one of the things they did is that they looked at their target customer and they said, okay, what pain does this customer have around this purchase? What motivates this customer to make this purchase? What concerns does the customer have around this purchase? What fears does this customer have around this purchase? What other forces are acting upon this customer when they make this purchase? Which is all really great basic market research. Well, actually, it's not basic. It's deeper market research. But they also kept asking why. Why are they doing what they're doing? And then they added to it, and they said, okay, we think we get this. But the industry that's currently serving this customer, why are they doing what they're doing? Because they're not serving their customer. Why? And they dug into that. And so what they ended up with was this really great, complete picture of why things were how they were. And so once they understood that, they had a much stronger platform for launching their product. And so when we went to help them launch their product, we knew exactly what their product needed to look like. We knew how it needed to be messaged. We knew how it needed to be delivered to meet all of those needs that had been identified. So we did that. We launched the product, and that company is still alive today and thriving. So those two stories, I think, are really good examples of why insight is important and how it can really serve a company. Insight should inform everything a company does. And I think that sometimes there's the notion that market research or insight really just helps you talk to your customer. But that's not a full use of it. Really, insight should be feeding everything your company does. It should tell you how to design your product, how to deliver it, how to talk about it, how to service it. And really, most companies don't do this. And you see this in startups as well as in corporations, because it does take a little extra time and commitment up front to do so. But that's the beauty of it. If you're willing to do it, you're going to be that much further ahead than your competitors. So I think that gives you a sense of what insight is and why it's important. I want to talk a little bit now about, well, how do you do it? How do you become more intuitive in your business? And really, insight, this is an investigative exercise. So, and it can actually be really fun. It's, if you think about it, you can put your journalist hat on and you can say, why? Okay, I just got all this research. It's sort of the mainstream research. Probably everybody gets it. But if you actually looked at it and said, why? Okay, you told me all the information, but why? And then, the process really is, okay, let me go look in the corners of the room. What else is out there that I don't understand or that really isn't covered in this research? And then I'm going to bump that up against this mainstream research, and I'm going to say, where are the conflicts? Where are the contradictions? Or where is it reinforced? Then I'm going to maybe bring in, I want to make sure my whole team is involved, because your product person and even your financial person and your marketing person are all going to have slightly different perspectives on what this research is really saying. Because, we're human beings, so a lot lies in the interpretation. So one of the things, when I work with companies, I facilitate cross-functional, collaborative, really committees to look at this. And we look at that research and we say, okay, what does it mean really? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I want you to go out and I want you to go find other information that maybe is just tangentially related. It doesn't even seem like it's related, but go get it. Bring it back. And then let's bump it up against this main body of research. And does it change your interpretation? Do you think differently about your market now? Or did everything get completely reinforced? Now, I've generally never seen that happen? Usually it's oh, this is different. This actually gives me a little bit more insight into what's really going on out there. So it's the process is really, frankly, about bringing together sometimes disparate pieces of information and examining it from many different angles. And today we have a lot of information. We have data analytics. We have tons. You can buy research everywhere. You just have tons of it. It's almost too much. And so the danger there is that you just lock into sort of one stream of information, and you've missed a lot. And the other thing about this is that when you open yourself up and bring different pieces together, you also start to be able to get predictive. Well, what's coming down the pipe that I need to be prepared for? So there still needs to be, the sort of journalistic hat on that says, how does this all fit together, and what's the real truth here? And that takes a little bit of time and commitment, and maybe even, a little upfront money to put all this together. But I think Company A is a really good example of, well, if they had spent a little bit more time up front, they wouldn't have spent millions upon millions that all just ended up going down the drain. So I think to end, I'm going to give an example of what this looks like at the end. And I'm going to leave these up on the table, and you can come take a look at them. But this is the outcome of the process of doing insightful research. And what this is that this is a company that actually had a captive audience, but they didn't actually know who their customers were. And it was a very diverse group, and they weren't serving them well. There were problems. And so we went through an exercise that was cross-functional, that used a lot of good research, took research from primary customer research, secondary market research, analytics that were captured by the company, so data on how these customers were behaving. And we took all of that, and then we added other pieces of information. The team went out and just anything that was even tangentially related, insurance company information, Wall Street, journal articles that had a mention, and started to put all these pieces together. And we were able to create a very detailed profile of all the different customer segments. And what this allowed us to do was create this really powerful playbook. This drove everything that we did. So one of the things was, okay, well, who should we not be paying attention to? Why are we wasting our time on this segment when they're never going to purchase? It's never going to happen. It allowed us to say, okay, so for the other segments, why are they acting the way they're acting? Okay, now we know, we get it. So we've got to give them different products and services, and we have to message them differently. To our sales team, we said, do you know who you're talking to? Because there's a few qualifying questions you could provide, and then you can figure out which group this customer falls in. And now you know what they need, how to sell it, and how to follow up with them. In terms of predictive, who's our leading edge customer? And what are they doing? And are we there with them? Because if we're not, we better get out in front of that, because they're leaving us. So this one chart was the playbook for everything we did. And we did it, and it was successful. And it's not static, though. This has to be revised every year, I mean, depending on how dynamic your market is, it's a process you need to keep deploying on an annual or semi-annual basis because your market's going to change. And whether you're a really young company, or an older company, I mean, part of this is just applying a process that you respect that is both creative and disciplined. So it means keeping an open mind, really understanding that, just because your first assumption is validated doesn't mean you know enough about your customer to get them to purchase from you. So, all right, I'm going to leave it there. And I think it'd be helpful just to ask questions, and I can give more detail there.
Okay, so we'll get Q&A started right now. I'm going to give the mic to John. Raise your hand. John will give you the microphone. Please stand up, give your name, maybe what your company is, and then ask away.
Hi, I'm Steve Bessard. Can you tell us what the columns and the rows are, and maybe what's in one or two of the little cells?
Sure. So so this is sort of naming the category, like who are these customers? We gave them descriptive names, so we know who we're talking about. And then down the side, it was things like their behavior, their channel preference, how do they like to deal with us, their behavior around the product we were selling, how do they use it, their strategic or financial approach to the product, how strategic is it, how do they allocate funds to it, and then sort of a conclusion as to, well, how should we be dealing with these customers?
Good morning.
Oh, let's see. The thing I love is our leading segment. It was really great. So let me read. Let's see if I can find this section. Well, it doesn't quite. Maybe we didn't put it on here, but okay. So our leading customer here, first of all, didn't like us and really didn't want to wait for us because we were way too slow. So they went out ahead and is looking for innovation. They're doing it on their own. They're not waiting for us to do it. That was, to me, it's like a wake-up call, They themselves got heavily involved with the regulators in order to change the market because we were too slow in doing it. And they were likely to have experts in their own organizations. Again, they'd given up on us. So.
Sarah, so in my sales practice, my clients go to ready, shoot, aim, which is basically what you're talking about.
Right.
So they send the sales team out to try and figure all this stuff out, figure out the sales process.
Right.
And they don't do what you're talking about. So I'm trying to understand why. Right? Is it a matter of money? Is it a matter of being too concerned about product development and not concerned enough about market? Why are these companies almost consistently not doing this upfront work before they send a sales team out on the street to get killed?
So usually it's because there is short-term pressure to get revenue in the door. And so they want to shortcut this process. But it's that classic, but if you don't make the right investment up front, you're actually going to spend way more money on the back end. And that's a hard argument sometimes to make in environments where people are feeling really pressured to get money in the door now. So, part of it is just trying to continue to educate them and, give them the stories like I just gave on company A and company B. It's like, well, which company do you want to be? Because, why risk millions of dollars for relatively small upfront investment to get a better handle on who your customers are? But it is hard. People get pressured and are just grasping at where can we make money.
Over here. Hi, thanks for coming.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a sales executive, And I noticed today when you were talking, this is kind of in keeping with his question, you said you check with the marketing people, the product people, but you never mentioned the salespeople. And kind of to his point, as a sales guy, we're handed a stack and say, go out and sell. And then, well, those sales guys are a bunch of idiots. They can sell a bucket of water to somebody on fire. And it seems to me that a lot of people expect salespeople to be miracle workers. Mm-hmm. And here's the guys that can come back and tell you, hey, I know why George didn't buy. He just told me.
Right.
Any thoughts you want to add to that?
Yeah, and that's probably an oversight because the last company I worked with, I was actually head of sales. Okay. So that was a bad oversight on my part. And actually in this exercise, the salespeople were involved. But it's a good point. You know, people just think, throw some salespeople at it. And, you know, I mean, I've had people come to me and say, can you sell ice to the Eskimos? And I've said, no, I can't. And that question frightens me, that you're even asking it. So, I mean, you make a good point, and it was an oversight. The salespeople actually absolutely should be involved in this, and because salespeople are the front line. They're hearing that stuff, and it needs to get fed back into this process.
Okay, I'm Alice Law with Adventure Corporation. I want to ask you, should we talk to the customer or the end user? Or how can we find the right people to talk to?
You can usually talk to your customer either formally through things like customer focus groups or informally through things like association gatherings or places where your customers gather. You know, you go there and sometimes it's even just listening. What are they talking about? You know, what subjects are most important to them? And so there's ways, and whether you're a small company or a large company, you can get to your end user, and you should. I mean, especially today with technology, there are online forums and association forums where you're hearing stuff go back and forth. And this is where it becomes a discerning exercise. You have to weed out the noise and listen to enough of it until you get like, okay, this is really what the issue is. Does that answer your question? Uh-huh.
How can I find a customer?
You don't know how to find them?
Yeah. Who should I talk to? I cannot just talk to everybody, right? But we need to find the right person.
Okay, so, I mean, once you do your basic research, you understand sort of who your customer is, and then it's finding out, well, where are they? Where do they reside? How do where do they gather? How do I get to them? First defining those parameters should lead you to a place where you can reach out to these customers. And then, getting to the right one, well, sometimes it just takes trial and error and some time. But you should be able to identify where your customer is going to be. And most human beings are organized into, some kind of social group.
Good morning, Pat. Very good stuff. I'm interested, you talked about looking into different corners and whatnot, and the issue of spending money up front to save money later. How do you avoid the inevitable mission creep? How do you constrain the scope of your services in a way that the entrepreneur is comfortable hiring you?
Oh.
Mission creep. You know what mission creep is?
Well, you mean in terms of the market research? Because mission creep could be your business, too.
Let's say that you've got a customer whose business is selling baseball cards or something, and it turns out that everybody in Cincinnati likes baseball cards. So now you need another $10,000 worth of research to find out what's going on in Cincinnati, which is part of the process. How do you control and manage that inevitable issue of mission creep?
Okay, well, part of this is not just money, but it's giving importance to this process. A lot of this information is actually available out in the world, especially now, but it's slowing down a little and taking the time to just gather it and examine it. within your organization. You may not need to spend $10,000. You just need to maybe spend 2 more weeks. And that's one way to contain some of that. It's just to say, slow down. And I don't know if you've heard the expression, slow down to go faster. That's the message. Just slow down a little bit so you're clear on what you're doing. I mean, if there's a real need to enter the Cincinnati market and you really have no knowledge and need to understand, well then, yeah, maybe you need to spend the money. But this is a disciplined, facilitated process. It doesn't have to. You don't have to buy hugely expensive research reports and hire a PhD in data analytics. You don't have to do that. You have to give it the level of importance within your organization to spend the time doing it.
So I'm a bit confused. Your role is as a facilitator for the customer to then spend their money doing the research independently of your interaction with the company?
No, my
you do the research. Do you go to Cincinnati and find out? Or are you guiding, are you counseling and facilitating the companies?
Yes.
For them to do what you recommend that they do?
Right. So I would work with the company to say, here's the research process. Here's how you gather the information. Here's how you examine the information. Here's how we open ourselves up to get insight. And then here's what it means. Now, if there's a need to go to Cincinnati to do a focus group, well, then it'll be obvious that you need to do that. But I think, the thing that you're bringing up is sort of, and maybe I'm interpreting it wrong, but I've seen a lot of companies trying to shortcut that process, and so then they just throw money at some big research project. That's not what I'm advocating, because really, again, if this process is done correctly and is disciplined, you don't have to spend oodles and oodles of money. I mean, most people, I can't tell you how many small companies I've had say, oh, I need a VP of marketing. And I'll say, why? And then when they tell me what they want that person to do, I say, no, you don't. Because they're not asking that person to do this, which a good marketing person is trained to do. They're asking that person to do PR or to host an event. I mean, it's sort of akin to, throwing the salesperson out there with no information. Like, why are you hiring a VP of marketing? You're spending quite a bit of money to hire a VP of marketing to go set up a trade booth? Really? So.
Great stuff, Sarah. Scott Witt here. What I'd like to do, well, first off, really what you're talking about is continuous improvement applied to marketing and overall business strategy. So anybody who's curious about this stuff, look that up online and apply those basic ideas. Asking why a number of times in a row is the first point of that. What I wanted to do is pull it back to the salespeople, because I think one of the things you're saying is really important, but also the sales guys. I've done a lot of marketing in my life. And, really the sales is the front line, where they're really the infantry. And I think, there's this saying that no battle plan survives first contact with the enemy. And so what's really, really critical, I think, is to enable the salespeople to say, okay, this is what we think we want to do, and this is what we think's happening. But then they're out there getting, collecting dozens or perhaps thousands of interactions per month. Can you talk about your experience in kind of the ongoing collection of that feedback and then acting on it?
Mm-hmm. And it's an interesting topic, because honestly, sometimes salespeople can be their own worst enemies around this, in that they don't want to share information. It's always been a little astounding to me, but one of the good things about this process is that it forces people to collaborate. There is this sort of historical gap with marketing and sales. And it needs to be closed. But having said that, the salespeople there are really great CRM programs, right, where if you can get the salespeople to actually populate these programs, you can take that information and start data mining it. And it's anecdotal, but you can do Word, you can do, there's a lot you can do with that. Even better is to institute this process and force the salespeople to sit down and talk about, what did you hear? Why did that customer not purchase from us? Why are they delaying their purchase? And it's putting a process like this into your company to force everyone to sit down and collaborate. Because every position in your company is important. There isn't one that's more important than the other, even though sometimes it might seem that way. You've got to move your whole organization forward. So, to your point, I absolutely agree with you. This is the front line, and there's a lot. But also, sometimes it's training your salespeople. Sometimes they don't realize what they've heard. I've had a lot of conversations with salespeople where I've had to ask them many different ways to try to get them to tell me, what did you really hear? What did that customer really say to you? And things will pop out of their mouths that they're surprised about. So, and sometimes it's training your whole organization. Because you think about it. How many people in your organization touch the customer? Your customer service people, your sales people, your marketing people when they're out and about, the CEO when they're out giving talks. You have to almost train everyone to get that ear going to what they actually say to you. And how do you get them to start capturing that information? And part of it's training, and this kind of exercise helps, because again, it's getting people to be more intuitive.
Hi, Victor. Thank you for your presentation, and I was just wondering how we can apply this process to, say, a small-scale, service-oriented organization, like, let's say, a solo player.
I think you can do the same thing on a smaller scale. Try to get outside of just reading your narrowly defined industry news. Go outside a little and read, start researching outside of that. So you start to get clues as to what's happening, what forces are acting upon your industry. Step outside your box, essentially. Try to attend, events that aren't quite about your industry. And you'll be amazed at what you hear. And sometimes you say to people, "Oh, I'm in this industry," and they'll say, "Really? Oh, I heard this," and you'll start to hear things. It's like, oh, I wouldn't have heard that if I stayed within my lane.
Hi, I'm Larry Alvarado, doing career planning in college prep.
Oh. Okay.
How do you change people's assumptions or challenge them? Because we all go into whatever business or endeavor with assumptions and both of what the need is, who the customer is, and how to address it. And how do you find what's really tugging at you at the edges? Because things move in other industries faster, or at least to our perception, faster than what we see is going on with this. And thirdly, could you have saved Radio Shack?
I would have loved to have tried. I love Radio Shack. People are resistant at first to, once they make an assumption, they want to move, and they believe in their assumption. So one of the ways to do that is to get them into a process like this. Because once they start looking at other information and hearing other opinions, people do change. They do open up. So if you can get them into this process, then it sort of forces them to step back. This was a really great example where, I had sort of warring factions all come together in this process. And at the end of the day, I remember at one point, everyone had a really important team meeting to go to in their own department. And so I remember thinking, oh, great, well, we're not going to have our meeting. Every single person showed up to my meeting. Because, the other thing about it is that people actually started enjoying it. Because they got to step outside of their box. Sort of to the point over here. And we're human beings. We actually really are wired to learn and to be productive and to move forward. Sometimes we're our own worst enemy in that respect. But, I I hear what you're saying, and people do get on their tracks and they don't want to get off it. But so if you can, especially if you're starting a company, put this process in place right away. Make this part of the culture of your company so that you're keeping that openness, you're keeping everyone involved and collaborating, and your whole organization becomes intuitive.
Last question?
Sure. I'll be the last question. So for the last question, my name is Greg. I'm a fine art photographer and love innovating. Anyway, I wonder how you deal with the situations that I found with companies that, they do a market research and they determine A, B, C, D, D, and this is what the user wants, this is what the customer wants, and then they go, well, we're doing E and we're doing B, so let's convince the customer they don't need A and C. And that seems to happen a lot, which drives me crazy sometimes with software and sometimes with other products. It's like, they're burying the things that it doesn't do and promoting the things that it does do. And how do you deal with that? Because you kind of talked about it, finding out, well, maybe customer A or company A in your first one, they just needed to convince the people better that they wanted it. And then they're successful and they lose sight of it. So anyway, that's my sort of question and answer.
Well, the problem is, so, if you're talking about a very well-established, mature company that has market share and, in some ways has a captive audience, it can be difficult because there becomes a level of arrogance there. We don't really need to change. And frankly, this company had a lot of arrogance. And there are times when you have to say, well, I'm going to let you fall on your face. Because what that does is it opens up opportunity for somebody else to come in. If it ends up that the customer is really not getting served and the company just isn't interested in serving the customer, that's why new companies enter the market. So, there's a point where you don't want to fight to the death to get an old company to change their ways. You'd much rather go work with a new company and say, hey, guess what? There's a big opportunity out there.
Great job. Thanks, Sarah. So everybody's favorite time is to do a picture with you. If you want to stand up here, we'll get this whole group of beautiful people to photobomb you. Okay. And you're ready? Your marks, get set, go.